Good morning, evening, or afternoon, comrades. First of all, we apologize that it took us a bit longer, but it has to do with the fact that we are kind of separated by almost 200 kilometers away. In fact, you came over today as well, and that's also the reason why I am the only one who is drinking. It's a tradition of our summit to involve a kind of a drink which is created by Robert, and something we will get back to it in a bit. But first of all, very important, awesome announcement. You all have said it from the Summit 1 that we should make it as a podcast in terms of that we should upload it to iTunes or SoundCloud. And I can proudly and very happily say and announce now that you can listen this particular video, or actually podcast, now on iTunes and Spotify. And there'll be also probably download link in the video description, so you can actually listen to it while you go to your work in your car or on your job or whatever. So I'm very excited. I hope it's worth it to go through all this trouble to find out all this new technology. But I think it is, and let us know. The next thing, what's the next thing?
Well,
I guess the drink.
yeah, I guess we'll talk about the drink. What the heck?
Yeah, by the way, you can also make sure to check out video description where you can find all the time codes because we have plenty of things to discuss, and we might be breaking the 1 hour barrier this time.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see, right. So what have you made for me this time? And by the way, yeah, again, I'm drinking only me, so.
He's drinking alone tonight.
Yeah.
No, so what this is it's a little bit different. A lot of people say, oh my gosh, gin and rum together, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But if you get a good Jamaican rum and you mix it with gin, and so what we have here is Jamaican rum, gin. We have lime juice and then simple syrup, or if you don't have simple syrup, then you can go with about a half teaspoon or 3/4 of a teaspoon of sugar. Mm-hmm. So we have 1.5 ounces of gin, or I'm sorry, 1.5 ounces of the Jamaican rum, and then we have a 3/4 ounce of gin, 3/4 ounce of fresh lime juice, and then basically the half teaspoon of the sugar. Mm-hmm. It's pretty strong.
It is.
Because you saw the contents are all, you know.
Yeah, it's the first thing I said. It's pretty strong. So by the end of this podcast, well, we're talking like that. Don't blame me, blame this guy.
It's my fault.
Yeah.
And now you know why I'm not going to drink it tonight and drive home.
Probably so. No, it's because we're responsible, you know. We want to project responsible image. But anyway, let's get started. Our main topic of today will probably be answering one of the most frequently asked questions regarding how to prepare your car for the Nordschleife. A lot of people have asked, what do you actually mean with the club sport spec? Because this is what we call our cars is like semi-modified, but still street spec. So this is what we're going to be referring to, how you should prepare your car according to the specifications, how you should prepare your car to be safe out there. Because most importantly, of course, we're not allowed to talk about lap times. We don't do that. But priority number 1 always is the safety. So, but before we're going to do that, let us move back because like one of the main topics of last week was regarding the electric cars and hybrids and hypercars. And we briefly touched on it, but still not enough because back then we were limited by a memory card capacity of our microphones to 1 hour, so we're running out of time. And this time we can actually go on endless forever. But again, we'll just try to keep it up with somewhere around 1 hour. So electric cars. We touched on Rimac or Rimac, this hypercar. I can briefly say it's obviously inevitable. We need to.
It's going to happen. We need to embrace it.
We need to embrace it at some point. We have Formula E. Lots of teams, lots of factory teams, manufacturers are pulling out of WEC Le Mans series, like Porsche pulled out, Audi. They say even Porsche, like that. You would be like, Porsche want to do Formula E? Yeah, well, maybe they are, and then I don't think it's a bad development. There's a lot of good things going to come out from that because eventually all of motorsports technology have their roots from the Formula One. So in case of Formula E, if they're gonna make some cool, well, very important and very good technology, and that will be transcended over to road cars. This is something everyone will benefit from eventually. So for me personally, just in a nutshell, I don't want to go too much into detail on last week's topic. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. I would be very excited. For example, like last year we had the Neo 9 car. Remember this Chinese
exactly.
supercar that did sub 7 minutes on the Nürburgring Nordschleife? It was very cool. We haven't seen much more of it ever since. Some people have asked, for example, the Porsche Panamera or Mission E, which is going to compete with Tesla.
And it's actually a pretty cool looking car if you look at it.
Yeah, we've seen. Well, I've seen the prototype running around the Nürburgring. It's fun because it goes fast, but you don't hear anything. You just hear the tires screeching. You only hear the tire noise. Yeah, eventually it's going to be interesting to see that car in action. What it's going to bring, and yeah, like you said, we need to embrace it.
Yeah, I think we need to embrace it, but we're going to touch on this a little bit later. What do I need to do to prep my car for the track? And obviously weight management is one thing that we look at. There's a lot of fun cars out there, maybe the new M5. There's going to be a really neat car with the selectable all-wheel drive and everything like that, but it looks like a heavy car. Mm-hmm. When you look at the test videos and the track videos, you can see the body roll that the car has and everything like that, and that's hard on the front tires.
Yeah.
You know, that's really hard on the front tires, and whereas it's a plush car, a fun car, it's a fast car, it's hard on the tires. And that's the problem that we're going to have with electric cars until we get the technology behind it to lighten up the batteries. And
the cooling is also a very big issue at this point, high performance cooling.
Right. And then, but on the other hand, so we're talking about on a track car, we want to lighten it, and the electric cars are going away from that. But if we want to talk about what's the hardest thing to do sometimes in a car is to stop it. To stop it efficiently, cost effectively, and reliably every single time.
Yeah.
And something to me that I really, if you want to talk about looking forward to on electric cars, is the capability that we're going to have from the braking systems. Mm-hmm. We're going to probably ultimately get to a point where we're braking with no mechanical function. Mm-hmm. It might all be electromagnetic, which is ultimately recharging the batteries.
Like you have on the 918, for example.
Exactly, but much more sophisticated where, obviously there's going to create heat, but if we can get rid of wear, and we're not wearing down brake discs, and we're not wearing down brake pads, and we're simply slowing the car down with the electric motors, as long as we can control the heat generator from that, that's going to be pretty amazing. Because you will have an infinitely adjustable brake feel, infinitely adjustable brake bias, all with electronics. And I think that's really neat. So if you're the type that you want to trail brake and let the back out, then you just slide the dial up a little bit, put a little bit more front bias or something like that. And I think it could be, really, really interesting. So we'll see what happens with that. But I know it's going to go that way eventually. So you might as well find the things that you're going to enjoy about it and do that. And it's just like we talk about here, all the different cars that we get to drive. You find the things that are cool about each one. You find the things that are enjoyable about each one, and you exploit that. Yeah. And I think that's what you're going to have to do with electric cars.
Yeah, that's a very nice point you brought up there. I mean, since of our business background of renting out cars, and our biggest consumables are obviously brakes and tires. And if you can reduce that and even expand that to the ways that, like you said, you can even adjust the brake bias, it's going to be amazing. I still want to say, however, to the young generation and the current generation, still let's try to enjoy the internal combustion engines as much as we can.
Absolutely.
Because, I doubt that like in 30 years, because you hear that the governments are trying to,
they have to ultimately,
Obviously, but you already know that it's coming closer. Like in 10 years, some governments only will allow only over full electric vehicle sales and no internal combustion engine. So it's coming. So while you can enjoy it, because like in 50 years, you'll be telling to your grandchildren, back in the days, I had to replace my engine, like my piston. What's a piston? What's a turbo? It whistles. How does a whistle make your car go faster, granddad? Well, sit down, little fella. I'll tell you a story. But yeah, let's move on to our next subject, something that was asked to you mostly ever since from the ever first summit, almost a month ago by now. We discussed the issue why you would not get the Porsche, and then everyone, and then we explained all the alternatives, but we never touched upon American cars, and especially since you are from the States.
I think it's interesting because we're going to go from hybrid cars to American cars, which are like a complete 180 from each other, right? It's like, okay, here we have the most, green and earth friendly, as long as you're getting your energy from a clean source.
Yeah.
And then we're going to American cars with 6-liter, V8s. So the reality is that I do love, if you were to ask me what motor would I want in a car, what do I want to hear? I want to hear a big naturally aspirated high compression V8 with a huge cam in it. That's what I want to hear.
Oh yeah.
That's it. And I think that it's just an amazing sound when the car's idling and it's just got a nice little, exactly, a nice little lump to it. And I think that to me really is what I grew up with and what gets me excited about when I hear a car idling. When you turn on the Speciale and you hear it, well, yeah, that sounds good. But you know what? It's just a tone. It doesn't shake the walls. It doesn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what these big cammed, big cubic inch motors were doing, was really giving you emotion just from the instant that you turned it on. And when you tune a car and you build a car that maybe has one of these motors stock, and then you put the bigger cam in it, put higher compression heads in it, you know, the way that when you're driving or you give it a little rev or you come to a stop, the idle dips down because it just needs to find its rhythm, and it just, there's something about it that's really amazing. And so to me, that I love that. And that leads us to what people are always asking about, the Corvette ZR1. Is that something that interests me, or the Viper ACR? And I think they are both cars that are pretty cool. I don't know why I've never really loved the Vipers. It's never been something that I've wanted to get, or I've lusted after or looked at and said, oh, one day I'll have that. I don't think I will ever have a Viper.
I think it's something, if you would look into JDM world, a lot of people they either love or hate Subaru. Yeah. They either say, oh, it's amazing boxer engine rumble, or it's just a couple of guys who are vaping. And it's probably the same with Viper. I mean, you either love the 8.3 or 8.4 cylinder engine, and
yeah, and I don't think there's anything.
Not cylinder.
I don't think there's anything wrong with the car in terms of a style or a look. I love the big fixed wing. I think that's so cool that it just goes back to like when I was talking about McLaren building a Senna and me loving the fact that they're building that. I think it's really neat that Dodge puts this monster wing on the back of the car, you know, and gets it road legal in the United States and in Europe. I think that's so neat. And that's the same thing with the ZR1, you know. But the thing is, I've had many Corvettes, and I had some really cool Corvettes with just exactly what I'm talking about. Big cams from Z06s, just about every thing from a C5 up I've had and have modified it and had a lot of fun with it. But so I think I've kind of been down that road before, you know. And there's no doubt that we could build an absolutely stunning Z06, for example, on the track with direct fuel injection and, you know, all of these things. We could build something stunning, but it's just not the direction that I want to go right now. One of the big things that a lot of people talk about the Viper ACR is the front tire. Yeah. They had the biggest problem. They're running a 295 25 on the front, right? Yeah. I mean, the problem is when you're running a 295 25 profile, you have literally rubber bands on the front, and there's no way to manage the heat. You guys saw that the car had crashed. It was public. It was nothing hidden, but they crashed the car on one of their speed runs, and the reason was the front tire blew. Yeah. And it wasn't the first time that the front tire blew in that couple weeks of preparation. It was multiple times, and it was because they couldn't manage the heat. We went over to where they were storing all the tires, and it was literally just mountains of blistered and bubbling front tires from an ACR. Yep. And that's just a design issue. You don't put a 25 profile front tire on a car that's going to run on the Nordschleife and attempt to get speed. So a GP track is going to be even more difficult on a front tire than the Nordschleife is. So at the end of the day, I think that the car has fundamental issues that make it fast, maybe a one-lap wonder type of thing, but for consistent running, it's not. And that's an issue that you have with a lot of supercharged cars. You know, you can manage the heat in a turbo a little bit better than you can with a supercharged car. And so now if we're going to talk about the supercharged cars, now we have basically a big blower that's mounted right in the V of this engine, and it's just one big heat module. And everybody knows that that was a big problem for the newest C6 or C7 Z06 was that it has this supercharger, and again, it's a one-lap wonder. It's not a one lap of the Nordschleife wonder. It's a one GP lap wonder. You have heat soak that starts to set in, and then the power gets reduced and everything like that. So those are small issues that I have with the cars themselves as they're built. Can you go through and maybe clean some of that up with ECU programming? You might be able to.
Smaller rim, bigger tire.
Yeah, smaller rim, bigger tire, but then you're looking at brake clearances, you know, everything like that. And when we looked at the ACR, there wasn't a ton of room there to go down to a 19-inch front tire, or front wheel, I should say. So as cool as I think the cars are, and as much as these big motors, these 8-liter, 6-liter motors, really, I find them to be amazing. I don't think it's something that I'll go back to. I don't want to say never, but at least in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, or anything that you will see that will be related to the most amazing racetrack that we are at.
Right, but you know the thing is, I can tell you that when you go out like in the LT, and you run with the Z06, the C7 Z06, the LT is quicker, but not much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's there's not a huge difference between the two cars in terms of speed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge difference in price, but you know, it just comes back down to, I think at the end of the day, the fit, the finish. But if you're looking for something bang for buck, absolutely, the Corvette is probably the way to go.
Especially in the States where the prices are a lot lower.
Absolutely. I don't think I could think of a better car price point for performance than a Corvette.
Now the next point, jumping from electric cars to American cars, is actually jumping again to something completely else. Is what many of you have asked about the hypercars. So actually even the hypercars beyond the hypercars, like the AMG Project One, the Valkyrie, the Aston Martin. Who else do we have? Do we have any? There was I believe there was a third one, or wasn't there? No.
I can't think of anything right now.
No. Yeah. So I think that those two, and eventually other car manufacturers will obviously
they will jump on it.
They will jump on it. But people have asked, will those cars break the record of the 6 minutes 11 or the 6 minutes barrier on the Nürburgring? What do we think of them in general? For me personally, I don't know. Well, it's an amazing development. Obviously, it's great, and I think there are multiple challenges that we will have to face if we're going to talk about the lap records.
Right.
Because it's not only building the ultimate car. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the technology is there to build the very fast car.
Yeah, the technology. We possess the technology to break the record.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the bottom line. And the thing is the car that has the record right now wasn't a road car.
Yeah,
it was a race car.
Yeah, Group C, Porsche 956.
So we're comparing right now, you know, McLaren P1 LM. What did that run recently? 942 or something like that?
Yeah, 942.
You know, and 30 seconds is a long way to go.
Absolutely, it's a lifetime.
But what kind of weight difference did we have? You know, there's a couple thousand kilo weight difference alone. We have. Could a Le Mans car come here and beat the record? We don't know. Possibly.
Maybe.
You know, it's all boils down to who wants to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to come here and say, "Oh, now we have the record." Is it worth them to do that?
Yeah.
Every class has right now. Racing classes have limitations. They have regulations. They have balance of performance that they're dealing with. So you say, "Oh, a GT3 car can't even come and compete with this record." Well, I don't think that anyone has said, you know what, all costs, I'm just going to go get the record. Because if it was, it'd have a 5 in front of it. That's my opinion today.
Yeah. Apart from technology, the also very important bit is the driver. I mean, even with the Porsche records, Stefan Belov, may God have his soul, he did obviously 6 minutes 11, but his teammate Derek Bell was 30 seconds again slower, or 20 seconds. So that says a lot, and it was the same car, but the driver was a lot slower. And nowadays as well, you see a lot of drivers, but also most importantly, car manufacturers, they need to project this safe, friendly image. So they don't want to risk, especially things on Nordschleife, where people are up until this day with all the safety measures, unfortunately still sometimes die on the track.
Absolutely.
And like, for example, the 918, Walter Röhrl, one of the most amazing drivers, was involved with the lap record. And the GT2 RS, I thought that he would get involved as well, but he actually said in one of the interviews that the cars are getting just way too fast and it's just way too dangerous, and he joked by saying, I need to drive 3 hours in a traffic jam to go to the Nürburgring Nordschleife. It's not worth for me to do a lap record, because now he's like almost 70 years old, if not 70. And but I think somewhere in the back of his mind, he thought that, like, I'm not going to risk my life for something that was, back in the days, it was a thing of honor, gladiators, the Group B.
Well, I mean, look at Formula One drivers from, this era. I mean, it's,
it's mostly about Instagram likes and
deleting your whole Instagram account. But I mean, really, if you think about it, it's a different age. Safety is. We always want safety. We want to be able to go out and enjoy our hobby and come back from it and not have that fate. But if you look at Formula One in the 60s, 70s, I mean, really even before that, it doesn't matter. These people were on a death wish every time they got behind the wheel. Now Fernando Alonso can crash at 300 kilometers an hour, climbs out, and walks off. Nothing against him, but it's nothing against him, but it's more along the lines of the safety is much higher. And it's because we're aware of this. We're aware of these problems. And we know how to keep the cars safe. And sometimes a company says, just like Misha just mentioned, I don't want to go and put somebody in danger of trying to have a lap record, because failure is going to get more publicity than success.
The issue is we have two things. We have two parties. So on the one hand, we have the public. You can say like, hey, we want to prove that we are fastest, but why do you want to prove that? Right. For all the either Instagram likes or for the honor, because that's why you do it. You do it for the public. On the other hand, you have the government and everyone else, all the parties watching. In the 50s, there was a huge crash in Le Mans, which led to the fact that Switzerland, up until this day, has banned all the racing. So the issue is, it might be a harsh thing to say, but the fact that if one death, Joseph Stalin used to say, one death is a tragedy and a million is a statistic. One death could be, again, just a statistic. Well, one driver dies and would be a honorable thing and would become legendary like a Senna, but it could lead to complete prohibition of motorsports, of series and everything.
Absolutely.
And I think this is, a bigger thing that would influence the whole world and everyone. And that's why, again, people don't want to risk anyone's life. Yeah, it's a very cynical thing, but...
It goes back to, like I said, that one big accident from a manufacturer trying to set a record with death involved is going to get far more negative publicity than them actually setting the record successfully. And it's going to bring more legislation down and potentially people looking at it. It's just like, the bottom line is, we don't show it, we don't support it, but there are crashes on the Nürburgring.
Yeah.
It happens during tourist drives, it happens during races. And we try and stay away from that, because there are far more successful stories of the Nürburgring than there are of these accidents.
And this was actually my next point that I wanted to bring up, that we haven't planned to discuss today on our Summit version number 4, is actually all the crash videos that you see on YouTube.
It's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem, and I must honestly say I was part of it, of showing crashes in my beginning YouTube career, because it gives you views.
It gets views.
It gives you views. And people start discussing. I never showed any bad crash or actually crash. Apart from racing, but within racing, they say if everyone is safe, you can actually show that, because it was done in a closed environment. It's fine when you show crash within racing, but you have all those channels on YouTube that show the crashes within tourist environment, and some of them are actually lethal that have been showed. And the problem is, up until this day, Nürburgring Nordschleife, many people who come here, they say, we don't understand how this can be legal up until this day, that you can have 400 cars at the same time and just without any control. There's a lot of things that you cannot simply control, and it is still legal. So a lot of people just question how it is even possible. And there are a lot of political parties, especially within Germany, who want to see Nürburgring Nordschleife being closed, and they use that as a part of their political program, saying we would love to
look at the danger, look at how many people, it's seen that it's a death wish to go on track, and that's, from my side, that's obviously, I believe it's far from that. I think that if you're safe, if you're conscious, if you're a defensive driver, that you can have safe laps.
Yeah. You actually said, because we were interviewed once, remember, on the car park by the German television, you said that you were actually on that day, you drove all the way from Italy from your holiday.
Yeah, and I saw more crashes and bigger crashes on the way from Italy to here than I did in the entire day of driving on the track. Someone can get technical and say, oh, well, you have a sample of, you probably drove with 500,000 people, but on the racetrack you only were there during the same time as maybe 4,000 people. Yes, that's true, but we also want to look at what was the intent of the people driving. Yeah. Right. On the road, it was true accidents. You're always going to get some idiot that's going to come out, drive faster and harder than he should, and he's going to crash in the wall. But this happens. That guy's going to crash no matter where he goes. I've seen cars up in trees before. I've seen them up against telephone lines before, in houses. Just recently by us, there was a crash where a kid ran into a house and then head on with another car. These things are going to happen. And I always maintain that if I'm going to be on the road, even with my family in the car, I would rather be on a one-way street where I know what everybody's intention is. Yeah. Everyone's intention is to go fast. And if I set myself in between those people, then I can keep a pace that keeps myself or my family or whoever my passenger is safe. Can something happen? It can. When you're doing 750 to 1,000 laps a year, there's eventually a point that something can happen.
Sometimes even twice a year.
But you know, so with that being said, you have to drive within your limits. The same people that are crashing on the Nordschleife are going to crash on the street because they're careless.
Yep.
And that's going to happen. Look at when the track is closed, people go out and sometimes they're idiots on the road, and you've seen pretty good crashes.
Yeah.
There's been deadly crashes out here, some very well-known ones, and they're on the surface streets and not on the track. So at least on the track, we run helmets, we run roll cages, we run harnesses. We know that there's a guardrail all the way around the track that is intended to soften blows. We know that there's emergency crews available. These are all the things that does make it a little bit more positive to drive on the track in this manner. But I say it every day, it's absolutely amazing that we have the ability to do this, because there's nowhere, could you imagine this in the United States? Oh, it would be a legislation nightmare. There'd be lawsuits like you couldn't believe. It would really be phenomenal to see something like this exist to the public. You know, if it was a private track, that's one thing, but to the public, it's actually unfathomable. And you do have to think there's a time that this could end. There really is. And do you want to be the person that's supporting the end by giving those parties or those people or those powers the ammo that they need to show how reckless and crazy this place is? Or do you want to support it and say, look, I just did 750 laps last year with not one incident and not one close call? That's the difference. You know, there were 2 situations this last year where I was pushed off track.
Yeah.
Both of them were places where it looked as if the guy was going to let me by, and I only took the pass because there was an exit route.
Yeah.
The exit route was used, car was not damaged, car did not lose control, and we went on.
Yeah.
If those 2 points didn't have an exit and I was not clearly sure, I simply would have not made the pass. But there are people that would have made the passes in those situations, and you would have had a crash.
Yeah.
And so that's where it comes down to defensive driving and why we don't talk about lap times, because I don't care if I lose 4 seconds because I have to wait for somebody through a turn. I'll lose 4 seconds. And it doesn't matter. If you're the passenger in my car, you won't know the difference if you just did a 7-minute flat lap or if you did a 7-minute 45 lap. You won't know the difference.
Yeah.
The track is so long, you won't feel the difference.
Yeah, because how much is 4 seconds?
Yeah, 4 seconds is nothing, but I even think 30, 40 seconds
Even
to somebody new.
Someone ever first time, I think like even 10 minutes is going to be fast. I mean,
Absolutely.
I took sometimes people out with my up, like who have been never out on a track, good friends of mine, like and we did like 10 minutes to just chilled in the traffic. They're like, holy shit, it's fast.
Exactly.
So it's a good
Because you don't get to drive like that on the street, and the minute that you can, you know, go full throttle into a braking zone and slam on the brakes, their mind is blown at that point.
Yeah.
And so literally you can go on a 9-minute lap or a 9-minute 30 lap that's fast. And that's why it doesn't come down to the bottom line, laps, the actual lap time. It comes down to having a clean lap, a fun lap, and one where you come home safe and you get to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. So also, like for example, the i30N, the unit that I'm trying to get, probably eventually we'll get. Obviously, we're just gonna go probably next week to have just spec it, have a look at it. A lot of people ask, what's Hyundai i30N's lap time? Because it's a pretty fast front-wheel drive car. It will be probably maybe top 5 fastest car, because currently the fastest cars have around 300 horsepower and every horsepower matters. So this one has 25 less. And Hyundai openly stated that we don't care about lap times. Yep. We don't want to project any image. It's about the fun that you have on the track with this car. Of course, some people can say like, oh, they just like use it as an argument because they know that they cannot beat it. Well, so be it. But I think that's a very important image to project, and it's more important. But let's wrap up this topic regarding safety and move on to our, let's say, main subject of today is how can you prepare your car to be safe out there on the track?
Absolutely.
I think, like I said, the most important thing is the safety. And the problem is, and I think everyone, including me in particular, is guilty to it. When you buy your first car and you enter the world of tuning, you want to go faster.
More power.
You don't think about stopping faster or going faster through the corner. So the first thing you're gonna do is either, if you have one of the modern cars, when you just do ECU
update, give it another bar boost or something,
like 50% more power, and you go crazy then. That's the huge misconception, because if you cannot go faster by just going faster. And I think this is something we've shown also earlier this year with the Sub 7 Up, for example, when they had more horsepower. Of course, on a very low powered car, it matters. But the biggest advantage you're gonna have on the racetrack is regarding safety. And again, regarding safety, it will be more safer. So we're talking here brakes and suspension. The rule number one are your brakes and tires. The suspension doesn't even matter. Just look back at my vlogs. Diana has now E36, 318. What did I get her for Christmas? I could have gotten like a fancy exhaust or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I bought a brakes, a complete set. So brake pads, brake discs, and brake fluid. The thing that number one that you need to get are the brake pads and the brake fluid, because with the pads you have better brake performance. And with the fluid, the issue what you have, if it gets too hot, you can lose the brake feel and your pedal will just slam through the floor and you will just won't have any brakes at all. So the rule number one, make sure to get the brake fluid and
get the brakes sorted out. A lot of cars, even the M series cars, that's what they're intended for, is to drive on the track. And if you're even talking about that level car, or if you're talking a 318 or anything, it really starts with the brake pads, the brake fluid, and I say stainless brake lines.
Yeah,
stainless brake lines.
This come after. So
exactly.
What I want to say is again, pads, fluid, or even probably fluid, then pads, but the two should be done at the same time. Then discs. And what I want to say regarding brakes, a lot of people think that you need to buy a big brake kit or massive swaps. You don't need to have that. Well, if you run high competition and you want to go for a record and you run endurance when you need to have a lot of heat management, then at some point it may give you like 1 extra second, but you're paying so much more money, and the difference you're gonna notice is pretty much it comes to zero. So those are the important things. Of course, if you have the budget, then just swap all of them. I remember my ever first car that I bought it, and the brake pads were almost gone when I bought it, so they were gone in the next second week. So I ordered the big brake kit all around, but that was just because I was stupid. It was worth it eventually, but anyway.
I think that comes down to a lot of things. Is when that was your first car. You were out there.
My first upgrade was a stereo, though.
But you probably weren't braking correctly.
True.
And that's another thing a lot of people don't realize. I get people, my pedal was gone, my brakes are shot. Okay, what brake pads do you have? Oh, I've got a padded brake pad and I've got this. Yeah, you're braking incorrectly. There's a good chance. Nice firm braking at the proper braking point. A lot of people come and they get to the high speed sections and they think they want to scrub just a little speed, and they put 15% brake on literally for 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And that just wears your brakes down and creates so much heat that it's not even you can't even fathom how much heat it created. So proper braking technique is going to really lengthen the amount of time that you have on track. We run stock. When we get the cars, we go have fun with them before we upgrade them.
Absolutely. To measure, to tell them what the upgrades actually do to them.
You could run the Polo that we had, the first Polo that we had. You could do 4 or 5 hard laps on it before your brakes actually started to get fade. And where it would happen would be you're coming down to Versiphon, and that's where you would start to get that fade on the 4th lap. Well, that's because the car was being driven decently, and you weren't just riding the brakes everywhere and scrubbing speed where you didn't need to, and that also works on the tires as well. So prep the car, prep it correctly, but also prep yourself. That's also a really big part of it.
Yeah, coming back to that point, just a small advertisement there. Make sure thereby to check out one of our performance driving days or track days in general, book instruction. And even if you cannot come to the Nürburgring, there are plenty of driving schools, performance driving school, high performance driving schools around the whole world. Make sure to check them out, because they're gonna benefit you also on the daily driving, and benefit you if you just like only doing one track day a year or every 2 years. But if you know how to brake properly, because the stuff that they teach you how to brake usually at public, with casual driving license schools, they just brake very softly and all the time. Sometimes it's not always optimal.
It keeps you out of trouble because you're not braking too late.
Or you have your foot always on the braking pedal and you know how to react all the time. So make sure to check that out. But
let's take a little side note, because I think sometimes it helps to understand what's happening. When you push on the brake pedal, you're pushing fluid through the master cylinder, which is then splitting it up to each wheel or to each corner, and that fluid is getting pushed through. It's almost like a syringe. It is a syringe pushing fluid through. And so this is something that as that fluid gets hot, it gets compromised. Okay, so that's why the race fluid that Misha was talking about is very important, because it keeps the fluid intact. It makes it to where it doesn't, its consistency is the same. And then as you push the brake pedal down, the fluid goes into the brake lines, and then it gets into the caliper.
Yeah.
It is then dispersed to the pistons, and that pressure of brake fluid then pushes the pistons, and it smashes the brake pads together, clamping on the brake discs, and that's what stops the car.
Yeah.
Anytime that you have too much heat, that's going to compromise the entire system. If you have brake lines that aren't solid, that's going to compromise the system. So imagine that you have really hot brake fluid, and it's in a steel banded but rubber, a mainly rubber hose, and it's very, very hot. Everyone knows something rubber is going to start expanding with heat. So now you've put full brake on, and all of the fluid is pushing on the brake disc as hard as it can. It's going to go to the weakest link and make that expand. And that's most likely going to be your rubber brake lines that go between the actual brake line into the caliper. So that's another reason why a stainless braided line really makes a huge difference, because it stops allowing that fluid to expand the rubber brake line and lets you now put that actual momentum and that force and that energy into smashing your two brake pads together around the brake disc. So that's one reason why you need to understand how this function works, and why is it that a brake line is so important. Why is it that good fluid is so important? We need to have a substantial fluid. And then why is a good brake pad important? Because now you're in a performance situation. You're clamping down on these brake pads at very high speeds. You need a compound in the brakes that isn't just going, your discs aren't just going to rip apart. And also brake pads handle differently with different temperatures.
Absolutely.
So the hotter the brake pad, the more it's going to wear down. So brake cooling ducts, that would be your next step. You know, as you start driving, you take it by steps, and all of these things will add into it. Maybe we do a show sometime and we just talk about brakes or something like that.
Yeah, could do. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are there any brake companies there that want to jump on the show?
Yeah, might be kind of cool, huh?
Yeah,
It'd be neat.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for this very technical explanation. I hope you guys understood, and also people who are listening to the show, that they understood, because we were using a lot of visual.
Really high-tech visuals. We had PowerPoints and spreadsheets and
absolutely.
this diagram that I drew. Was
it was great. I never knew you were such an artist. But the next point, again, most important part, is the tire. And this is something we also discussed multiple times through our vlogs, why we're on certain tires. Because, again, I'm just going to say, I always like to use my own faults to educate you guys with my own crashes. One of my first ever crashes that happened is when I was driving the Time Attack race in Assen in Holland. I just decided to go out on a set of semi-slicks when it was practically snowing out there. And I crashed in the first corner because I thought, I have a Subaru all-wheel drive. What can go wrong, you know? But even that can go wrong. The tire is your optimal and final and actually weakest link with the brakes, with the road surface.
with the road surface, yeah.
This is the most important bit. So never ever compromise on brakes and also the tires. At the same thing, you cannot say, okay, I'm gonna invest like €1,000 in brakes and just only €10 in tires. This is not gonna work.
It doesn't work, yeah.
We know some people who run secondhand tires. If you run secondhand full race slicks, it's one thing. Like you can discuss.
Yeah, you might have somebody that went out for a hot lap and they were trying to set a qualifying time. Then they bend the tires. No problem. Go ahead and use it.
Absolutely. But a casual tire, like you should not do, because again, we're just going too much into engineering of a thing, but a tire can only go through a certain amount of heat cycles. If it gets, you warm up the tire, you lower the tire pressure, you run for it, and that's it, it cools down again. And with all those temperature changes, after like a certain amount of heat cycles, the tire just gets too hard because the outer layer becomes too hard and you have less grip, but it's too much of a detail. What I want to say again, if you decide to go track driving, make sure your tires are in optimal condition. First, it should be a good compound, it should be a good tire. So don't go out just on winter tires. We've seen plenty of people come out here, do winter tires and run 3-bar pressure, and they're like, what the hell, dude? I mean, it's cool.
I don't know. We had a day where it might not have hurt to have some snow tires.
Yeah. That's true. I'm repeating myself. Don't save any money on tire compound. Make sure you always run optimal tires. Don't be stupid like I was, thinking like, oh, okay, well, I spent like, let's say for McLaren, almost €2,000 worth of tires. Right. They should perform everywhere at every condition right.
And they don't.
They don't. So always make sure to know that, okay, if it's raining, don't go out there simply because you don't have the right tire, or fit something intermediate. This is the most important bit. The second point is what we always also tell, well, which is very important characteristic of a tire, is the tire pressure. Yes. A lot of people underestimate it. I only see, I don't know, maybe like, out of the whole car park, how many people you see ever do tire pressures?
Not that many.
I'm not talking about track days, because on the track day pretty much everyone does it.
It's not that many, and it's actually a concern because, let's get technical again. And if you think about running a tire, so in the McLaren, we have on the back of it, we have a 305 tire, okay? And that means it's 305 millimeters wide essentially. It's never really exactly that, but that's the idea behind it. And what you have is you have that width of a tire. The ultimate goal is to have a nice even contact patch across your tire. If you have too much pressure, you have a bow. And that's going to wear the center of your tire, and that's going to compromise your grip because now most of your pressure is on the middle of your tire. Well, what do you have 300 millimeters or 350 millimeters of tire for if you're only going to use the 12 millimeters in the middle? Or 12 centimeters in the middle. There's no point. So you need to find a tire pressure that keeps your tire flat on the road. Then you have situations where you get too low of pressure. If your pressure is too low, then you have a cup where the two outsides are touching. And now what happens is on your turns, you're rolling on the outside of your tire, which means you're completely loading the sidewall, which then actually damages the sidewall of the tire and makes it to where when you get to high speed, you can actually have a blowout. And then another big thing that a lot of people don't realize is say, oh, you know, in the McLaren running on a Trofeo R tire, the car absolutely loves 2 bar of pressure. Okay? Well, if it starts to rain and it cools down and I get to 2 bar of pressure, that's actually bad because as you start cooling down, maybe you get to 1.8 bar, now you have that cup like I was talking about. And then what happens is as you're driving through a puddle, that cup traps the water. And that cup traps the water, and next thing you know, you get into a hydroplane. So you can correct that by driving in rain, potentially with a slightly higher tire pressure. And that gives you a way that the tire forces water out because it's mostly rolling on the center. So understanding your tire pressures is absolutely critical for safety and for tire life, because all of those scenarios that I just mentioned absolutely kill tire life. I've seen people go out on a set of Dunlop Duretzas and destroy their tires in 1 lap because they ran with too low of tire pressure and destroyed the sidewall. It's terrible. And that can absolutely happen. So it's worth the headache of getting out after a lap, checking your tire pressures, and learning them. If you're really good at it, you're going to know what your temperatures are all the way across the tire, and you're going to learn how to set your tire pressures based on that as well.
Yeah, to finalize this segment regarding tires, I just want to say, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of comments coming in or questions in our inboxes like, what's the ultimate tire pressure? The thing is, there is no such thing as an overall ultimate perfect tire pressure. There are certain values that are being given to you by the tire manufacturer because they run endless amount of kilometers of tests before they produce the tire. They invest billions of euros or dollars or whatever currency in there to make sure that everything is perfectly fine. So they have those values, and those values depend on mostly the weight
of the car,
weight of the car.
Exactly.
Actually, mostly the weight of the car, and again, regarding which tire, which specific model you are running, because it can be either 2.2, but on the up, I'm perfectly fine running like 1.8.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't realize, you think, oh, the car likes 2 bar. Well, if you go to a street tire, a street tire does not have traditionally as strong of a sidewall as a semi-slick, for example. So if you go to a semi-slick, you can drop your tire pressure a little bit more to get more flexibility in the tire to have it work the surface better and actually provide you more grip. But if you go to a street tire and you run it that low, now you're just sitting on the sidewall and you're putting too much pressure on the sidewall because it's not built for that. So you need to look at every tire, talk to people who have been running that tire, what have they been successful with, what's lasted. And I would say if you're in doubt, you're probably a little bit better off slightly higher than slightly lower. Without a doubt, because low tire pressure can cause a blowout, but a higher tire pressure, obviously within reason, is going to tend to be a little bit safer.
Yeah, just want to make a small comment regarding the fact that you should talk to other people who are on the same tire. Again, the best thing is check, first of all, the manufacturer sheets Because again, those people may have like certain driving style. Their car can be completely different. I mean, you cannot ask me who runs Volkswagen Up and who is someone who wants to run an M5 on the same type of tires.
You can't do it. It's going to be completely different.
It's going to be completely different. So make sure to check those, and after that, you should check again the tire pressures. And if you want to take it to the next step, get a temperature gauge so you can like.
Yeah, if you really want to go crazy.
If you want to go crazy, you can see if the heat is completely equally divided throughout the tire, and then after that you can go even crazier. So those are the two things, the tires and brakes.
Don't you think the first thing someone should buy is really cool sensors that mount inside your inner fender liner that actually shoots the tire so it sees exactly what temperatures while you're driving?
I think this is something you should have on actually hybrid cars.
I think so.
And apart from the tire temperature, also the brake temperature. I think it's a very important thing.
I can tell you, like the Speciale, all of the cars have tire pressure sensors, those cars, but they don't show across the actual tread of the tire, and I think that would be so neat because you can work alignment on it. Yeah. You can work your tire pressures based on it. You can correct so much with that, and you can get your optimum contact patch really based on tire pressures or knowing what your tire temperatures are across the whole thing. But it was more of a joke. Obviously, someone's not going to get their first E36 and put in a full tire monitoring system, but I think it'd be cool if you could. Yeah.
It's a good question why the manufacturers don't do it, like the manufacturers of actual supercars, because I don't think nowadays it would be a very expensive upgrade.
It's not that complicated. Yeah, it's not that complicated of a system, but it'd be neat. I think it's going to happen eventually. I mean, when we were just at in Cologne at the auto show, the motorsport show, we saw that really neat system, and I loved it. I would love to put it in every car.
Oh yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
Just so cool, and you know exactly where you're at all times. But hey, at the end of the day, we're just messing around now, but don't forget that tire pressures are one of the most critical aspects of getting out on the track and making sure that you have a handle on them, tires as a whole, that you have proper tires for the conditions, that you're not going out on a 2-degree day on semi-slicks if it's slightly wet.
Yeah.
You know, those are the main things that you need to understand, and you need to know the conditions that you're going in and make sure that the tire is appropriate for it.
Yeah. So again, brakes and tires, most important thing, do a lot of research into it. You can ask like one of the racing teams or tuning shops, but most importantly the manufacturers, what the optimal conditions, running conditions of those components are. Well, since we said we're going to cover the whole club sport topic, let's move on to the next upgrade, or even if this video is going to be, or the podcast is going to be even an hour long. After that is probably the suspension.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, you know, everyone knows that you need suspension. It's, I'm going to get my power, I'm going to get my suspension. You know, those are two things you need. And I can't tell you how many people, my tires are shot.
Yeah.
But they follow you, and you're in a car with lesser tire, and you're going faster and longer. It's about the balance. It's about knowing the car. It's about, first of all, knowing the track as well. But the next thing is about the suspension and weight distribution.
Yes.
A lot of people have the thought that I want to get the car as low as I can.
Oh yeah, and as stiff as I can.
And as stiff as I can, and that's not the case, because there's a perfect point of weight transfer. It's where you're going through the turn and you load the outside tires, but you don't load them too much because you keep that contact patch on the inside tires to assist with the grip.
Yes.
And there's this balance where you just get everything just right, and the outside wheels have the perfect grip, the perfect contact patch via tire pressures and ultimately alignment, and then the inside tires still have grip. And that gives you the grip to get out of the turn with power, and it gives you the grip to carry through the turn with the maximum amount of speed. And too stiff will not let enough weight transfer to the outside.
Meaning you will spin out.
Too much, too loose or too much body roll will put too much on the outside and not enough on the inside to keep you going. So there's this perfect balance that you get, and this comes from so many things. You don't just go online and say, "Oh, suspension, I'm good." You need to think about, what does my car weigh? Right? What do I weigh? Because your spring rates are what are all going to make a big part of this, in addition to your dampening and your rebound and everything like that.
Yeah. And apart from that, it's also, again, very important to know where you run the car on, because people think, again, many people still have to refer to like the computer games, and you see like, gravel setup, race car setup, like the tarmac setup, and it has to do with the fact that, it makes a lot of difference. I mean, even if we just like only refer to the fact that like to the tarmac surface, because the racetracks, tarmac. The fun thing that I wanted to start with an anecdote, last week it was the 24 hours of Dubai. I saw some pictures of it, and I looked at the cars and holy shit, shit, there's like completely zero clearance between the
they
cars.
can do it,
Completely like,
exactly.
But because I'm so used to looking at the cars who run the Nordschleife, and you have plenty of jumps, so you need to have a lot of suspension travel. So you cannot put the car a lot lower. If you're building a ring tool, because a lot of people like to say, yeah, I'm going to build a ring tool. You need to, yeah, absolutely, you need to have ground clearance, otherwise your tire is going to rub, and that may lead to exploding the tires and a lot of other things, but mostly the handling and safety. So this is something you obviously need to understand where you're going to run. And coming back to the point of also the tires, the same with suspension. You cannot go on a car park or on a forum or on a Facebook group and asking like, oh, I bought this set of JRZ or whatever, like KW, Club Sport or this. How many clicks should I turn to the left or right? This is completely irrelevant. It's totally depending on conditions, on the car. You need to weigh out the car, how you drive as well. Because, for example, in my case, like, honestly, a lot of people race car drivers prefer understeering cars. So they don't need to fight the cars all the time. For me, for example, with the up, I prefer when car would oversteer because there was so little steering input in such a short wheelbase car. So I would set up like the rear suspension.
He only liked the car that would oversteer because if he would turn the wheel, his traction control would come on. So if he could just point it with the back end, then he was good to go.
Absolutely, that was my only reason. So there are so many variables to that. So this is something you make sure to check. And also, for example, there's day and night difference within like the wet driving and the dry driving. So in dry, your car in general should be stiffer. In wet, your suspension should be a bit softer, or quite some size softer, depending how many suspension settings you have. Because again, to do some engineering explained kind of thing, if you put the load on a tire and if the car is completely stiff, the load goes completely on there. So the weakest thing is then the grip between the tire and the road surface because there's water in between, so the car is going to slide. If you're going to have more softer suspension and more suspension travel, first the body roll will occur and you will still have the turning in point. So
it lets the suspension load and adapt more to each corner so you get that rebound effect.
Exactly. While you are still turning your front wheels and the car will be turning instead of going, still straight with the turned wheels. So there's a completely different with that. So again, suspension is probably the third important aspect. And again, do not listen to every single person who said, just do like 4 clicks on the front and in the rear. You're good to go, mate. You should just like listen. Yeah, so this is a thing that you should definitely adjust, adapt. And I'm going to go a bit off topic here, but still I think it's an important point to raise. There are obviously like high performance model, like let's say BMW M or AMG or OPC if you like talk about Opel, and they obviously have more like sportier components.
Right.
But in reality, always manufacturer still needs to save money to offer this particular model to as many people as possible because again, supply, demand, economics laws, you all know about it. And even of course for the street, they may feel as stiff, and thereby nowadays you have multiple modes where you can soften the suspension and such. But for the track use, they are still too soft, or actually they react not in the way they're supposed to react because, let's be honest, 95 or even maybe 99% of all of those customers who buy this type of cars will never go on a racetrack because it's A, not their intention, B, they do not know how to drive or just really, or C, they're scared of crashing the car, obviously, or any other particular reason. So thereby they, and even if you take it even a step further in comparison, like when you look at all the like lap record cars, there are multiple examples. A lot of people say like, okay, they used full slicks. Something that you can see from the outside if you get to this particular lap record prototype car. But what you cannot see are the suspension components. And I dare to bet that the suspension is definitely not stock. Right. What you get on eventual production car. So if you are fortunate enough to own such a production car, don't think like, oh, my suspension is fine because it's I don't know, whatever, M3, M4.
Well, I think a good example is that the reality is that to make the M2 the way that we wanted it, we needed to change the suspension.
Yeah, and even
on the road, it was great.
Absolutely, and even going back to the fact, like the best car for the Nordschleife that we will probably never get, for your personal private use Porsche, and still up until this day, maybe the fastest, the best overall, the best car to run on the Nordschleife, and also lots of records are owned by Porsche. They can still go faster, and look at Manthey Racing Porsches. The only thing they do to it are the wheels, because you lower the mass, the rotational mass, and they put a different suspension on it. And they do go faster. They didn't do anything to engine management or whatever not. It's only that. So suspension, even on very expensive cars, you can benefit a lot from it.
I mean, the thing is now you're not going to have the same comfort level that you had. Say you take the Manthey GT3 RS that has their packet on it. It's going to go maybe 10 seconds faster on the racetrack. Well, that's great, but you're also going to be compromised on the road. And that's where the manufacturers have to find this balance between a good quality ride, quiet ride, keep your teeth in your mouth, and still have a performance edge to it. And that's why a lot of these companies have gone to electronic controlled dampeners, where they can make it stiffer and softer, but there's still the limitations to that.
Yeah. Again, this is a pretty long topic, and I think we already given it lots of attention this time. Let's move on to the next thing. Probably, what would you adjust to the car? I think we would go with the seats, because if we talk throughout this whole.
Like to the next step.
Yeah, next step.
I think the seats, because the next thing is that you don't realize how much feedback you can get from a car until you're actually a part of that car. And when you go to a seat that has proper side support, proper back support, you actually start to feel the things that the car is doing as it's doing it, as opposed to reacting. You're saying, oh, I feel that, you know, and you can correct a lot of things by being seated in the car properly and ultimately connected with the car via those seats and the harnesses.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just very simple. Get a bucket seat, but most importantly, again, I mean, it's a safety component. It's a handling component, but it's safety, because God forbid if you're going to have a crash, there are plenty of images, videos out there when the seat just snaps in half. So you can get nowadays, like, don't want to blame China for producing fake products, but because of the manpower is very cheap out there, you can get cheap stuff from there, and sometimes the quality is lacking. Like fake products, you can get a bucket seat for €100 nowadays.
Get a good seat.
Yeah, Ricardo pool position that we run are like, what, 600?
I think around 700 a piece.
700 a piece. There's quite a difference, and this is A, comfortable, B, you improve the handling, and C, just simply safe. Right. Because this seat will just like really not snap in half.
Yeah, and so you get the upgraded safety, and since we want all of our upgrades to give us safety and performance, you do get both out of it. Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of it, because until you've driven your car where you're on the track and you're sitting with your seatbelt with no side bolsters and you're just flopping around and you're holding onto the steering wheel, your knees against the door, you're just fighting it to stay in it. And then the next lap you put a race seat in it and you put harnesses in and you're truly attached to the car. Now all of a sudden you're actually sitting in that car and you position yourself that your back leans into the seat, the side bolsters hold you, and you're not even fighting it. And now you can feel what the suspension's doing, you can feel what the rear end is doing, and that gives you one of the best feelings about controlling a car that you can imagine, when you literally feel what the car is doing. But that added feel, that added feedback, and that added enjoyment is going to provide safety, because you're going to feel a loose rear end sooner. You're going to be able to feel what the car is doing a lot sooner, and you're going to be able to react better.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then moving on to the next upgrade is the roll cage. Yeah. This is probably one of the final upgrades, because up until the point that you go to a certain speed when it becomes necessary to install a roll cage, it takes quite some time, but it's a very important thing. And I want to refer to one of the comments that was put today on our on a video that I released today when we're installing a roll cage on the GT6. Someone asked like, "Oh, are your drivers this bad?" To which I replied like, "So every single race car driver is bad?"
It's all about safety. It's all about knowing that if something were to happen, if something were to happen, are the people in the vehicle protected? Yeah. And that's it. This is something we spoke about earlier. We don't show the pictures and images and videos of crashes, but we have stuff, because we're here, that shows the horrors of what can happen if you put a car on its roof or if there's a big pileup. And the bottom line is you want anything you can have to strengthen that roof line. Yeah. Luckily, modern cars are getting very strong. Exactly. But you want to provide that. And secondly, it doubles as a harness bar.
Absolutely, and it also adds rigidity, so the stiffness to the chassis, so there's less body roll. You improve the handling again. You probably need to compromise the weight, so because you add more weight, you should go for like plastic doors or something. But it's like completely crazy. Next upgrade, let's not go into detail. But what I want to say is, unfortunately, there are still people out there who say that it's not gonna happen to me because I'm a good driver or this, that. But the reality is, like, look at like 2 major crashes you had earlier this year on the Nürburgring. It had nothing to do with the driver's skill. I can tell you
that, we have a crash at Vauxhall and Hatzenbach, both 2 big crashes, and the people that got through were lucky. The people that didn't get through were unlucky. And some people just hit the patch of coolant just right, and other people didn't. Yeah. The same driver who got through could have been 30 centimeters more to the right, and he wouldn't have gotten through. Absolutely. And that's it, and that's all there is to it. So it's simply down to luck. I've watched the videos from both of them, some stuff that's private videos, some stuff that's public videos, and there are situations where you come around the corner and your front end is on good ground and your back end catches that coolant, you're going sideways. Yeah. Once you're sideways and your front's dry and your back's coolant, there's nothing you're going to do. Exactly. There's nothing you're going to do. And the best thing that you can hope for is that you had the proper cage, you had the proper seats to support you when you came in, and that you were wearing a helmet. That's really what it boils down to. Yeah, absolutely. It's very important, again, to have a roll cage. And I think, actually, maybe it's a case of a rollover is probably more highly likely to happen on a GP track when you have gravel traps. Yeah, I think that here we don't see a ton of rollovers. We see end-over-enders at Schradenkreuz sometimes. Or when a Honda hits a curbstone at Brunchen. That was interesting, wasn't it? It was. Yeah, it was kind of a low-speed tumble. Max does that move into bed sometimes. Yeah. No, but if you say I'm not going to run Nürburgring, it's not going to happen because all the other racetracks are less dangerous. Let me just give you an example. When you go into the gravel, if you decided to save money on brakes and you run out of brakes and you go straight into the gravel, never turn in the wheel, always go straight. Don't go sideways, because when you go sideways in the gravel, you're going to have grip because the gravel is there to slow you. So then sinks down. Yeah, so then you will start roll over, and that's when you want to have a roll cage. Also front, I seen one time when the guy who was running, I believe the C or the E63, one of the latest model AMGs. So this dude had absolutely no idea what he was doing, and at some point, like, people were already coming to his car and saying, like, well, your brakes smell, and they just went to have a look, and they said, like, you ran out of brake pads, and the next thing you're going to run out of talent. One more lap. And he said, no, it's perfectly fine, and yeah, eventually he was just running metal on metal, and as always, Murphy's Law, you're just going to have, like, completely, you're not going to, step into shit, you're just going to fall with your face into it, so you just running on the main straight, and his brakes were just gone. So he went in the gravel pit, and he rolled over in the front, and he ran it on the guardrail, and, well, luckily, it was, again, a new model AMG, but if that would have been an old car, and unfortunately, he had a kid in his car, and luckily, nothing happened again because it was a newer car, but it would have been an older car. They got very lucky. They got very, very lucky. So, again, if you run an older car, make sure to, if you're just going to reach a certain speed, no matter which racetrack it is, get a roll cage. I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the bigger accidents where the major injuries were generally in older cars. Absolutely, actually, all the lethal accidents and the back accidents. I mean, even if you get up into the E46s, I consider that an old car in terms of safety. In the last 10 to 15 years, we've made huge advancements in safety in terms of how the car is built, crash testing, rollover safety, and everything like that. And a lot of people don't know, or they may now they'll find out now, is that I bought Alex Hart's E36. Yeah, you said it on your Instagram, but we haven't announced it on the vlogs. I made some, yeah. And so with that, I'd been looking at E36s for a while. Alex and I have actually been talking about this since last season. I think it was probably maybe August, September that we kind of started talking about it, kicking it around and everything, and said, let's wait till the winter and talk about it. But as I was looking at the different E36s, requirements were it had to be an M3, and there had to be a cage in it, or I was going to have to build a cage in it. And I would not take an E36 myself on the track unless I had a cage in it. That's just the bottom line. Yeah. And everybody wants to go out and find a budget car to drive and a way to have fun, but safety is, at the end of the day, priority number one. You get a bolt-in cage. Just get that extra safety in there. You can get it for €1,000. Get something in the car so that if you have a rollover, even a head-on accident, even hitting the guardrail, a cage is going to add rigidity to the car, and it's going to give you a pocket to be in that's much, much safer.
Yeah.
So for me, I have the ability to go on the track in a lot of cars. I enjoy every car that I go in. I want to be in something that has a cage. We're looking at the next cars. I don't really want to cage the LT, but that's also a carbon tub. A huge difference.
Absolutely.
Those cars are very, very safe. But if we go to something like a 720 or the next 570, I'm actually going to have a cage put in it. And I think that it, one, gives that safety, but it also gives you a neat feeling when you're inside the car as well. So,
yeah, just to summarize, never, ever, 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 ever compromise on safety. Never, ever compromise on quality in general. I mean, if you're going to put a shitty turbo, you're going to blow up your engine or any other component. But
oil
safety,
leak, spin out, yeah.
But I mean, one thing is your engine blown up and you're like, oh, you have a sad smiley face that it's bad. You're like, you need to spend extra money. But if it's regarding safety component that it hasn't saved, it didn't do its purpose, you end up with a broken arm, broken leg, or even worse, lethal accident. And you're going to ask yourself, well, was this €1,000 worth it for a cage? Well, there's nothing left.
I think it's difficult too, because you have people that, we're all here for the same reason, whether it's the Nordschleife or whether, it doesn't matter if you're Italian and you're trying to go to Monza, if you're trying to go to Laguna Seca, wherever you're trying to go, you're looking at what does it cost to get on the track, right? What does it cost to build a car? What does it cost to buy a car? And we're sitting here saying, oh, get stainless brake lines, get brake pads, get brake fluid, get discs, get this. We understand that costs money.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to say, can I afford to do this or not, right? You don't buy a house if you can't afford to do it. So if there are budget issues, then possibly look at renting a car. That's why we have our rental fleet. It's for people that, one, want to come on vacation and get in a car, but we have people that drive to Apex in their Porsche, park it, and take the M4 out.
Or even a Polo.
Or the Polo. It doesn't matter. We have people that this year will park their Porsche and take the Up out, and they're going to love every second of it. Absolutely. But the reason they do it is because they don't want to worry, is my safety equipment up to standard? Do I have the right tires? Because are my day-to-day street tires that I can drive in the rain and in the Autobahn and everything, are they the correct tires? We want to get in something that we know is safe, something that we know has the proper track inspections, and is actually designed to run on this racetrack from a safety perspective of suspension and everything like that. So if you can't, come here and rent a car, because that's another option. We're doing something really neat that we're really excited about, is we're taking all of our cars to the first Sky Limit day, and we're just going to have them there, come rent it for 2 laps. Get entry to the track day, get the car, get the fuel with instruction, the whole thing from A to Z. And the prices are absolutely phenomenal. You guys can check this out, but that is one way to go to the track and enjoy it. And then you're going to get a feel for, okay, what did the brakes do? How did the seats feel for me? What was the feeling that I got out of the suspension? What feedback did I get from the suspension? And that's going to give you an idea of how you can build your car.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is also one of the things I said like 2 videos ago when I published the video about the Up, and I said I can talk on for hours about how awesome those components are, but you have to feel for yourself what they do for you. And eventually, if you decide to build a race car, or if you already decided but you just know what you should get for it, you just really need to feel and be convinced by it.
Yeah, and I think the neat thing is you can come here, test out some cars, and you can actually feel what did they do, and then you can apply that to your car. And I think most people have said, wow, this is amazing how the car stops. Stock brakes in terms of calipers. But we've done proper discs, we've done proper pads, proper brake fluid, and it makes a night and day difference.
Whereas their friend might have said, oh, you should invest like €2,000 in an AP brakes, like complete system. I'm like, well, you don't have to. Right. So, yeah, I think we managed to do what we wanted to do. We broke the 1 hour barrier.
I think it might be 1.5 hours. Yeah.
Probably. I hope you enjoyed. And if you say it's too long, we're just going to keep it around an hour. In general, we want to keep it around.
I think an hour is a good time, because I couldn't find an hour and a half in a day to watch
Exactly.
Exactly.
We just got carried away. But again, it's like 1.5 hour in a week. And you can just start watching or listening again tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, because I think it's a very important topics that we discussed. Exactly. It's very good. So again, I hope you enjoyed today's video. You found it very informative. Let us know in the comments, first of all, what you thought of it and what the topics for next week should be. Initially, we wanted to talk about our first cars. Yep. Yeah, so this is probably something we want to do today, unless you all gonna say in the comments, nah, we're not interested. Who cares what they drove? I mean, how did they get in the cars in the first place? Who cares? So let us know on top of that, and yeah, we'll be very happy to see you at the Nürburgring and also on our channels and also on channels because
and
we have
podcasts.
YouTube. Yeah, podcasts, absolutely. Spotify, iTunes. Yeah, well, have a good week. And see you guys next week.
See you guys next week.
Right.